Hello, you're watching AnewZ. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the headlines. Ukraine proposes a new round of peace talks with Russia next week. In Poland, thousands took to the streets in anti-immigration marches, with counter-protesters rallying just meters away. Azerbaijan hosts the third edition of the Shusha Global Media Forum. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv has proposed a fresh round of peace talks with Russia. In his Saturday address, President Zelensky confirmed that Ukraine has invited Russia to resume peace negotiations next week. The talks would follow two previous rounds held in Istanbul, which led to prisoner swaps but no major breakthroughs. Zelensky urged Moscow to stop hiding from decisions and called for urgent steps toward a ceasefire.
Negotiation dynamics must increase. Everything must be done to achieve a ceasefire. The Russian side must stop avoiding decisions, the exchange of prisoners, the return of children, the cessation of killings. A meeting at the level of leaders is needed to truly ensure peace, a lasting peace. Ukraine is ready for such a meeting.
Earlier, the US House of Representatives has voted to continue military support for Ukraine, with the measure passing by 353 votes to 76. Republican Congressman Don Bacon announced the outcome on social media. The strong bipartisan backing is expected to ease the bill's progress in the Senate, where lawmakers can amend, approve, or reject the text. If passed, the legislation will go to President Donald Trump for his signature. Germany warns Russia may soon be capable of launching 2,000 drones at once toward Ukraine. The estimate from German General Christian Freuding comes as Moscow ramps up production of Iranian-designed Shahed drones. In June alone, Russia launched over 5,300 drones, setting daily records and striking even Ukraine's western regions. Ukraine is responding with its own drone expansion. Officials say Kyiv can build up to 4 to 8 million drones annually, but lacks full funding. Meanwhile, Germany has pledged hundreds of long-range weapons to Ukraine by the end of July. Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, is also one of the cities hit the most. People from destroyed regions flock to the capital, but that only raises the risks to their survival. Let's take a closer look at the unpromised life underground for Kyiv's residents.
In the heart of Kiev, scenes resembling passages from history books have become a chilling nightly routine. 27-year-old Daria Slavitska, like many others, packs a yoga mat, blankets and food into a stroller and descends into the subway with her 2-year-old son Emil. She hopes to get a few hours of sleep underground as air raid sirens wail above. For over 2 months, Russia has pounded the capital with nighttime drone and missile attacks. These strikes are straining air defences and exhausting its 3.7 million residents.
We used to come here less often, about once a month. That was 6 months ago. Now we come here 2 or 3 times a week.
In scenes reminiscent of London's World War II Blitz bombings, thousands of Kyiv residents flee to deep metro stations each night. Slavitska's son, Emil, once terrified by sirens, has learned to accept them. She tells him the sounds are just thunder.
Before, when the Tu-95 bombers took off, they did not always target Kyiv. I do not remember the exact figures. If we remembered everything, we would have all died long ago. So we simply used to sit here. We just sat here. At 5 a.m. we went home and got some sleep. It was okay. Now it is no longer okay. Every single attack brings casualties.
In June, subway shelter visits surged to 165,000, more than double the previous month and 5 times higher than last year. The head of Kyiv's military administration confirmed the reason by saying that scale and lethality of strikes have grown. In just 6 months, 78 people were killed and over 400 injured. In April, a missile flattened a building just kilometres from Slavitska's home.
Imagine a situation where you go out into the street and a person is shot right in front of you. Seeing all this, what fear you experience, your heart sinks, your eyes bulge. People experience this every day, this feeling.
But the danger isn't only physical. The long-term stress and sleeplessness are starting to take a toll. A recent study found that 88% of Ukrainians now report very poor sleep.
Sleep deprivation brings lack of concentration, memory, declined cognitive functions. It affects mood, causes mood swings, emotional downs, extreme anxiousness and apathy.
For Slavitska, the hope is modest. A thicker mattress to make the subway floor just a little more bearable, and maybe one quiet night without sirens.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has expressed doubt that Ukraine will join the EU before 2034. His remarks came after talks in Berlin with Romanian President Nicu Șurdan, who urged the bloc to admit countries that meet accession criteria. Merz said ending the war in Ukraine remains the top priority and that full reconstruction could take years before membership is feasible.
Our top priority is to do everything we can to end this war. Then we will talk about the reconstruction of Ukraine, and this will certainly also be linked to a process at the end of which Ukraine can also become a member of the European Union. But that will take several years. As I said, the priority is to end the war. The second priority is to rebuild Ukraine and then embed all of this in an accession perspective.
Tensions are rising in Poland as thousands took to the streets on Saturday in anti-immigration marches, with counter-protesters rallying just metres away. The demonstrations, led by far-right forces, come amid growing political pressure, a murder case and new government measures at the border.
In Warsaw and more than 80 other cities, anti-immigration protesters rallied under the slogan "Stop Immigration," demanding tougher border controls and swift action from the government. Organised by the far-right Confederation Liberty and Independence Party, the marches drew support from nationalist groups sparked in part by public outrage after a 24-year-old woman was killed last month by a Venezuelan migrant in Torun. Across the road, counter-protesters held banners with slogans like "Accept the refugees, delete the fascists," a message directly aimed at the demonstrators. Police kept both sides apart. No major violence was reported.
I came here to show that we want peace in our country, that we have been an open country for many years. In fact, we Poles were refugees and emigrants to other countries for decades.
Smaller counter-demonstrations were also held in cities like Katowice, Krakow and Olsztyn. But in many towns, far-right protesters dominated, demanding the closure of borders with Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania and Slovakia, and even calling for troops to guard Poland's frontiers.
What I fear most is that there is no force in Poland capable of standing up to this short of bringing the army out onto the streets.
Confederation Member of Parliament Przemysław Wypler blamed both the current and former governments for what he called a migrant crisis, accusing them of failing to protect Poland's borders.
We are protesting against the helplessness and weakness shown by the government. We need the implementation of the Fortress Europe plan, Fortress Poland.
Confederation leader Krzysztof Bosak went further, demanding Prime Minister Donald Tusk's resignation, the full closure of Poland's eastern borders, and even permission for soldiers to shoot at illegal crossers. His remarks drew strong backlash from opposition parties and rights groups. In May's presidential election, far-right candidates from Confederation finished third and fourth, a performance analyst linked directly to their anti-migration rhetoric. Just a day earlier, Poland and 5 other EU countries agreed to tighten asylum rules. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz welcomed Warsaw's move to reintroduce border checks, calling them necessary. Poland has now deployed controls at over 60 checkpoints with Germany and Lithuania. A new law also limits asylum claims from Belarus, a response to what Warsaw calls a hybrid attack by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko to destabilise the EU. On Saturday, the Interior Ministry said Poland had issued 40% fewer special protection permits this year compared to 2021, crediting stricter enforcement and faster procedures.
Israel's military has issued a new evacuation warning for parts of central Gaza. The operation marks a shift into an area where ground troops have not previously entered. The Israeli Defense Forces are calling on civilians in southwestern Deir al-Balah to leave immediately, citing plans to begin ground operations there for the first time. According to a post on X by the IDF's Arabic language spokesperson, Avichai Adrea, the military is expanding activity to target what it describes as terrorist infrastructure. Residents, including those in tents, are instructed by the military to relocate to the coastal area of Al-Mawasi for safety. The warning comes amid ongoing conflict in Gaza, where humanitarian conditions continue to worsen. Hundreds of Israelis have gathered outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence, calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, a hostage exchange, and the resignation of the government. Protesters in Sera held photos of hostages and banners reading "Stop stalling and deal now," as they urged the Israeli government to act swiftly on a prisoner swap. Former soldiers and opposition figures joined the rally, where damaged vehicles from Gaza rocket fire were displayed. Israel says around 50 hostages remain in Gaza, 20 are believed to be alive. Meanwhile, over 10,800 Palestinians are held in Israeli prisons, with rights groups reporting deaths due to abuse and neglect. US President Donald Trump has said that another 10 hostages will soon be released from Gaza. Speaking at a White House dinner with Republican lawmakers, President Donald Trump praised the work of his special envoy, Steve Witkoff. The announcement comes as Israel warns of major hurdles in ongoing talks in Doha, accusing Hamas of stalling. Trump gave no further details, though his administration is pushing for a 60-day ceasefire.
Gaza, we got most of the hostages back. We're going to have another 10 coming very shortly, and we hope to have that finished pretty quickly. And Steve Witkoff has been fantastic. He's done a great job in that. He's a very good man, good deal maker. I said, I need a good deal maker with a good personality, and there aren't too many of them, but Steve is, and he's done a great job.
Rescue operations are still underway in Vietnam's Ha Long Bay after a tour boat capsized during a storm. The death toll has now climbed to 38. Search teams worked through the night, flipping the boat upright and calling out for any survivors. The vessel, carrying 53 people, overturned Saturday afternoon as Storm Whipper brought strong winds, rain and lightning to the area. Authorities say the storm, now moving closer to the northern coast, was one of the main causes of the disaster, one of the worst recent accidents in Ha Long Bay. Hong Kong has issued its highest storm warning as Typhoon Whipper brings hurricane force, winds, flight chaos and transport disruption across the city and to southern China.
Typhoon Whipper battered Hong Kong on Sunday, triggering the city's highest storm warning, the T10 alert, as winds exceeding 167 kilometers per hour swept across the territory. The eye wall of the storm passed just 50 to 60 kilometers south of Hong Kong, bringing torrential rain, powerful gusts and massive waves along the eastern coast of Hong Kong Island. More than 500 flights have been grounded and 400 others rescheduled. Ferry services were suspended and rail lines operating in open sections were halted. Schools and daycare centres closed and residents were urged to remain indoors. Temporary shelters opened across the city with at least one person injured and multiple reports of fallen trees. Neighbouring regions including Macau and Shenzhen also cancelled or delayed all daytime flights. As Whipper moved west towards southern China, Henan and Guangdong provinces were also placed on high alert. Further west, Vietnam braced for Wifa's arrival later this week, while the storm has already brought floods to the Philippines, where 2 people are reported missing. This is the first time Hong Kong has issued a T10 alert since Super Typhoon Saola struck in 2023.
Torrential rains continue to batter South Korea, triggering floods and landslides in several regions. The rising toll now includes 14 dead and at least 12 missing. In the northern county of Gapyeong of South Korea, 2 people have died and 2 remain missing after floods swept over bridges and triggered landslides. Rescue teams are still searching the area, as seen in the footage showing bridges buried under debris. In Sancheong County in the southeast, heavy rain caused a major landslide, leaving villages caked in mud. Excavators were deployed to clear debris. Since the downpours began on Wednesday, the extreme weather has left a growing trail of destruction across the country. At the 3rd Shusha Global Media Forum held in the symbolic city of Shusha, global media experts, policymakers and innovators came together to tackle one urgent theme: how to strengthen media resilience in the digital age of AI.
Today, we don't just consume news, we navigate it. On the 3rd Shusha Global Media Forum, this phrase is very often said by the media experts. In a time where truth competes with speed and facts must fight of space among feeds, the 3rd Shusha Global Media Forum steps in not just as a global event, but as a response to a global media turning point. Held in the symbolic city of Shusha, a place of a cultural revival and strategic vision, the forum gathered voices from across the world and professionals, policymakers, academics and digital innovators, all converging under one vital theme: digital pathways, strengthening information and media resilience in the age of artificial intelligence. But what did that look like in the practice? Let's hear from the experts themselves.
Let's begin by saying that this issue is fundamental because the future of the Caucasus, like its past, depends on it. I deeply respect President Aliyev for saying that there are indeed no fundamental differences between Armenia and Azerbaijan in terms of national and political interests. The real problem lies in the ideology of occupation, an ideology that has long prevented our development. If Yerevan can overcome this, not in words but in action, then progress is possible. 2 points are key. First, the dissolution of the Minsk Group of OSCE. Why? Because the Minsk Group of OSCE is about the status of Karabakh, and there can be no question about the status of Karabakh. The second point concerns the Armenian constitution. It must no longer contain territorial claims against Azerbaijan. These 2 steps would form the foundation, but only the foundation, of a long process we call cooperation between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which is essential for building the future of the entire region.
Вот знаете, даже меня-то очень тронула история сбитого азербайджанского.
I was especially moved by the story of the Azal passenger plane that barely made it across the Caspian after being hit twice. When asked about it, the president answered openly, "Russia must take responsibility." He didn't hide from the consequences. He spoke plainly, even though it may carry political cost. One short phrase stood out to me: never give up. That message, I believe, applies to all people, all nations. In the early 1990s, Azerbaijan faced isolation, propaganda, disinformation, and had over 1 million refugees. 20% of its territory was gone, no hope in sight. The most painful question President Aliyev heard back then when visiting refugee camps was, "When will we return home?" Many are still haunted by that question. But yesterday's message was clear: never give up. The answer is in your heart and your actions. Don't wait for miracles. Act. Believe. That's why this forum touches me so deeply. It carries a different character this year, and it reminds us, we journalists must be brave, must write the truth, no matter the cost. President Aliyev inspired me yesterday to write even more openly.
So I found it very interesting when I asked President Aliyev where he thought the future trajectory of that relationship between Baku and Washington is going. And he was very frank that he viewed President Trump as someone who is bringing peace to the region. He expressed thanks and appreciation for President Trump's role in attempting to broker a finalized peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And I thought it was also very significant that President Aliyev mentioned the commonalities in values between the Trump administration and Azerbaijan and the Azerbaijani people. So given the fact that relations between the United States and Azerbaijan under President Biden were exceptionally poor, in fact, that was another point that was raised by President Aliyev yesterday, there seems to be renewed hope here in Azerbaijan that with President Trump in the White House, that this could be a new era of cooperation, perhaps even strategic cooperation between the two countries. So
at the third Shusha Global Media Forum, Azerbaijan raised serious concerns over systematic disinformation campaigns targeting the country. Presidential aide Hikmat Hajiyev told reporters that some of the world's most influential media outlets have played a leading role in spreading false narratives, often going beyond social media and AI platforms. He warned that deepfake technologies are now being used to distort the voices of Azerbaijani officials, while diaspora groups continue pushing historical and religious misinformation about Karabakh.
For the first time in human history, there is a second thinking platform outside the human brain. That is, we must distinguish artificial intelligence not only from social media and algorithms, but also from what is known as machine learning technology. This system receives information, processes vast amounts of data, thinks independently, and makes its own decisions. It can even influence algorithmic processes. In this case, could professional journalism itself become susceptible to the manipulative elements of artificial intelligence? Yes, it is a vast and complex topic. That is why today, one of the important tasks for Azerbaijani media is to study artificial intelligence. When we meet with media leaders, whether in television or online media, we are already discussing the application of artificial intelligence in daily operations and studying international practices. If we look at translation work today, especially in the provision of voiceovers in the Azerbaijani language, while certain technical aspects are still not quite where we want them to be, in foreign languages, such as Russian and English, there have been good results in terms of providing translation. And these technologies are already being applied on several of our media platforms. I can even mention one example. We conducted an experiment within the Azerbaijani media, publishing an article generated entirely by artificial intelligence on one of the country's leading news platforms. But no one was able to tell the difference, whether it was written by AI or by a journalist. This in itself is part of a much broader discussion.
Our very own Orkan Amashov is with us live again, this time from Azerbaijan's Agdam, to share the latest updates from the second day of the Shusha Global Media Forum. Orkan, what were the main themes and standout moments from today's sessions at the forum?
Hello, Dilek. Very good afternoon to you. Yeah, as you said, today's day 2, and since we last spoke, and we spoke last 10 p.m. last evening, a lot has happened. Fundamentally, yesterday was welcoming day with President Ilham Aliyev's Q&A session dominating that day's agenda. Today, it's an opening day. The opening day comes after welcoming day. And during the opening session, Presidential Assistant Hikmat Hajiyev delivered his remarks, and they were largely about what Azerbaijan has done over the past years in terms of the recovery of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity in the context of media, in the context of the fake news prevailing and somewhat floating in the air, in particular between 2020 and 2023, after the war of 2020. We talked extensively about artificial intelligence, its impact on our daily life, its impact on the future and present of human civilization. And there was one key sensibility, and this sensibility being actually followed up and continued by other speakers during the first panel discussion. And that sensibility was about our instinct, our reaction to technological advances. What he said was that quite often when something new happens, and that's new, it's sort of beyond our control, and there is a danger of us being sidelined and finding ourselves not so impervious to the changing circumstances there is a knee-jerk reaction, which is a reactionary reaction. And he compared AI and our reaction to AI to some of the historic developments. He extensively talked about Azerbaijan's press heritage, about the formation of first Azerbaijani newspaper, which is closely, inextricably connected Azerbaijan's press day, describing it as the beginning of enlightenment of a new type in Azerbaijan and comparing it to modern developments. And the fundamental question that many people during the panel discussions have been looking at is we are shaping our present, we are innovating and designing new technologies such as artificial intelligence, but to what extent actually we are in a position of saying that we could ourselves, as creators of this technology, could be actually shaped by that very technology with our own creation. But of course, during the first panel discussion, our colleague, Ubisha Bandara, Washington correspondent, talked extensively about US experience, about that monopoly of what he described liberal media being dominant before Trump's ascendance to power, and that being changed. A lot will be discussed. Now we are in Agdam, of course, and Azerbaijani president's special representative in Agdam, Fizuli, and Khojavand regions currently in conversation with foreign participants. He's talking about the renovation process taking place here, informing them about the details, and we'll be here for a couple of hours. Then we'll be back to Shusha, and then day 3 will also continue in Shusha. That's all for now, Dilek. If any particular question you would like to ask, I'm more than happy to respond.
Well, I was going to ask you about some of the perhaps key discussions and how they're evolving compared to yesterday. You have partly covered it, but if there's something else that stands out to you, you're welcome to share that with us as well.
Thank you, Dilek. First day was an opening day, and that day the participants, foreign participants, 140 participants from 52 countries, were posing their questions to President Ilham Aliyev, and that was a Q&A session. Of course, the theme of the conference, as my colleague Ayten mentioned before me, is digital pathways, strengthening information and media resilience in the age of AI. That was mentioned at the beginning by Jane, by the moderator, who together with our very own Guy Schoen was a master of ceremony this morning, as I'm sure you already know that. But fundamentally yesterday was President Aliyev's responses to different foreign policy questions, also related to media, in particular realm of fake news, Washington Post, New York Times. Their approach to the way people are being informed have been discussed. All of these elements have been discussed, but today is the beginning of the panel discussions. A lot is to unfold, and tomorrow will be another panel discussion. And I guess by tomorrow morning, we will be in a better position to provide a comprehensive analysis. And I just want to inform you and our audience that tomorrow we'll have also a special side event dedicated to the launch of AnewZ opinion section and a screening of Shusha Destination film produced by AnewZ. And that will be also an important part of the forum, I imagine.
On Saturday, after the opening ceremony, President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, answered questions from the forum participants during the opening session on Saturday.
The discussions at the Shusha Global Media Forum, held under the theme Digital Pathways, Strengthening Information and Media Resilience in the Age of AI, once again demonstrated the urgent need for open dialogue in a constructive and respectful atmosphere, covering not only media-related matters, but also broader global issues. In this context, President Aliyev answered a series of questions from international journalists. One of the most notable questions came from a Ukrainian journalist who, reflecting on the ongoing war, asked what advice Azerbaijan's leader could offer to Ukraine and its people during such a difficult time. President Aliyev emphasized the importance of never giving in and never reconciling with occupation. Ubay Shabandar, a AnewZ correspondent in Washington, D.C., asked whether Azerbaijan and the United States can enter a new era of relations and become strong partners once again.
That's actually what we are hoping for. I think now, taking into account several months of our interaction with the representatives of Trump's administration clearly demonstrate that we are on the right path. We are back to normal relations. You know that the previous U.S. administration almost ruined U.S.-Azerbaijani ties. High-ranking officials from State Department were publicly saying that there'll be no business as usual with Azerbaijan again. And that was because we restored our sovereignty and territorial integrity.
The discussion then moved to a question regarding the approach of Western media toward Azerbaijan.
Western public opinion and influenced by Western media is extremely negative and unfair to Azerbaijan. And we tried to change it, but it doesn't work. And not because we were not active, we've been very active, but because there are certain rules and procedures in European political spectrum which dictated to demonize Azerbaijan and to spread rumors and different, fake stories about our country.
He underlined that following Western advice without question could have led Azerbaijan into conflicts with neighboring states, a path the country firmly rejected. Addressing questions about energy policy, President Aliyev underlined that Azerbaijan's approach to natural gas exports has always been purely commercial and free from political motives.
With respect to Russian-European Union relationship on natural gas, we never took this factor as something which we should take into account. We were never trying to compete with Russia, even when Russia was supplying 150 plus billion cubic meters to Europe, and we never were offering our service to substitute. No. For us, it's absolutely commercial. We always treated our energy policy as business-oriented. We never politicized it, never cut the gas supply to those whom probably we didn't like much. We always looked at as commercial and always observed our obligations. So there's been never any disruption in supplies to any country.
Ilham Aliyev also spoke about Azerbaijan's sovereign control over strategic infrastructure projects. He made it clear that the Zangezur corridor would remain fully under Azerbaijan's management, stating that there would be no operators, no leases, and no external control over this vital route. All projects would be carried out independently by Azerbaijan. Responding to a question about the recent air crash, the president noted that Azerbaijani authorities are aware that Russian officials have clear knowledge of what occurred.
Unfortunately, we didn't get any answer from Russian officials about that, though it's already 7 months have passed. For us, everything is clear. We know what happened, and we can prove it. And we know that Russian officials knows what happened.
President Aliyev emphasized that New Caledonia should continue its pursuit of independence, noting that recent developments between France and New Caledonia mark only the beginning of its story. The Shusha Global Forum reaffirmed its role as a vital platform for dialogue, providing a space for open discussions and highlighting Azerbaijan's vision and independent approach on both regional and global matters.
Fitch forecasts Armenia's budget deficit rising to 5.4% of GDP in 2025, before averaging at 4.4% in 2026 and 27. Meanwhile, public debt is set to climb from 48% last year to 51.3% in 2025, reaching 54.2% by 2027, according to Fitch. External vulnerabilities remain elevated, with net external debt averaging 28.4% of GDP over the 2025-27 period. Meanwhile, international reserves reached $4 billion in June, marking a 12% year-on-year increase. Fitch reaffirmed Armenia's BB rating with a stable outlook, projecting a 4.7% GDP growth through 2027. Extreme heat is turning into a silent crisis across Central Asia. A new World Bank report warns that without urgent action, cities could see soaring death rates, crumbling infrastructure, and massive job losses in the decades ahead.
Cities across Central Asia are facing mounting dangers from extreme heat, threatening lives, livelihoods and infrastructure. A new World Bank report covering 70 urban areas, including Central Asian cities Astana, Bishkek, Ashgabat and Tashkent, warns that without urgent adaptation, the situation will worsen dramatically. Heat-related deaths are already significant. In Ashgabat, around 25 to 28 people per 100,000 die annually due to high temperatures. Other cities like Astana and Tashkent are not far behind, with 19 to 21 deaths. Report claims by 2090 these numbers could escalate, with annual fatalities reaching as high as 23,000 in some cities. The economic toll of rising temperatures is also growing rapidly. In 2023 alone, extreme heat led to the loss of over 87,000 full-time jobs across Europe and Central Asia. Uzbekistan lost around 22,200 jobs and Turkey 16,100, while Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan and Cyprus also displayed significant expected working hour losses in the construction sector. Infrastructure is buckling under the pressure. Kyrgyzstan loses nearly 200 kilometres of road each year due to heat damage. Kazakhstan is also seeing roads warp and crack, especially in the south and northeast. The World Bank urges immediate action, more green spaces, heat-resilient buildings and better early warning systems could make cities safer and more livable in a warming future.
And that's all we have for now from Baku. Stay tuned to AnewZ for more updates.